Hi, this is Men Should Talk. I'm Gareth.
Hi, Gareth.
And this is Michelle.
Hi.
And we're going to talk today about the differences between arrangements and relationships.
Clients might come to therapy and want to discuss uh, their arrangements or their relationships, and I think sometimes a lot of clients use that interchangeably, and that can sort of be where we might start. So why don't we start with how we might get clients to understand whether they are in a relationship or whether they've got some kind of arrangement going on, and what the implications of that might be.
I think that's a really good place to start. So the first thing to say, let's just make broad distinctions between the two things. So an
Mm.
arrangement is set out. It's really clear. It says, I will come around on Wednesday and Thursday. I will go back on Sunday. I will come around again the following Wednesday and Thursday. It will include arrangements about money, about what's permissible and what's not permissible. And it will have clear boundaries and borders around it. This is what an arrangement is. And men often very much like arrangements because it's ways in which they can contain and delimit their engagement with someone else. A relationship is a thing. By that, I mean it's an organic thing that two participants are involved in. So when you're in a relationship, there's a to and a fro. There's progress and a lack of progress, but you're working together on something. And this is really, really different. So one of the tragedies you hear about is people want to get married and the marriage is going along so far, and then suddenly they discover that one person is holding back or not being as fully engaged as the other would like. And that's because one person might still be stuck in an arrangement, whereas the other person is trying to engage in a relationship. The person engaged in a relationship wants things to grow and develop and for it to be flexible. Whereas the person stuck in an arrangement thinks, well, this is what I do. This is what I've always done. I'm not prepared to make any changes. And one of the strange things I hear about, this is still odd to hear, is that people live together in a certain way for a period of time, maybe 7, 8, 9 years. Then they get married. And then when they get married, suddenly
It's split up.
problems appear. Yeah, suddenly they got problems. They were the same two people. What's happened? What happens in the language we use here is that one person is clearly still stuck in the finite measure of an arrangement, whereas the other person wants to be in the relationship.
And do you think that is because when we're in arrangements, say that they're about conditions and they're about moving forward in a way that's quite ritualistic. So we're working towards a marriage, but actually, what they're not working towards is a relationship. They're working towards a situation which is a continuation of the arrangement for one party, but for the other party, it's that deepening. It's that once we do this, we cross this threshold. That is where we develop the openness to be able to make mistakes, to grow
Yeah,
together, to be allowed to be who we are, rather than having to stick to like
it
you
makes
say,
absolute sense that this is what occurs. The person who wants this to be a relationship, to be fair, may not have fully articulated or fully even understood or brought to consciousness the difference between being in an arrangement and being in a marriage, being in a real relationship where things grow. If you're stuck in an arrangement, it feels safe to you. So some of the men won't. I mean, they will pay lip service to the idea of being in a relationship, but what they'll actually want to do is stay in the old places. And one of the reasons why, and it's a big topic for us, of course, has to do with emotions. If a man develops a series of techniques and processes, friends, family, places, that's what he wants to stick to.
yeah.
So when he gets married or when he gets into what he calls a relationship, what he doesn't want to lose is the area in which he feels safe.
Mhm.
And do not engage with emotions unless they absolutely have to, or whether it's in a sanctioned space like football,
Mhm.
sport in general, really.
Yeah.
So when he's asked to be in a relationship, unconsciously he's being asked to do something he's not done before, which is engage, genuinely listen, genuinely help, and open himself up to a new territory that he's not explored before. And sometimes the shock of that will make him pull back and say, "No, I don't want to do this," and I'll stay in my arrangement.
Mhm. Okay. Do you think that's why there is so much divorce? I think it's about 50%, isn't it? And
Around
why
50%,
so
yeah.
wise to those who are seeking therapy, often one person before they split may have had a infidelity or a series of them. Are they trying to look for an alternative arrangement or trying to figure out what's going on?
Well, that's a really great question, isn't it? One reason why somebody would have an affair is because an affair represents another arrangement. It's precise. I'll see her here or him here. We'll do this, we'll do that, and let go back. I did the word. It's like symbolically going back to something which is ordered, which can be managed. Whereas the relationship may be asking for things that he feels he can't do. He might be able to physically perform in an arrangement, but it becomes harder to physically perform in a relationship because it involves a degree of emotional commitment that may be rather difficult for him, particularly if he doesn't come from a background in which that kind of emotional commitment or that type of language is permissible. So
Yeah.
yeah, it explains that. It also explains men who, jump into boyhood, who continue to do the childlike arrangements that make them feel comfortable. Relationships are tricky. They're a bit much.
Hmm. Okay. So for who are successful in relationships and maybe come to see therapists for other areas of their life, what have you learned about successful relationships, particularly as it pertains to a lot of the men you've seen? We're not saying a blanket generalization because we only see men who come to therapy, but
Yeah. So I've worked through in the years I've been doing this. There are essentially four pillars that I think make a relationship work. And if it's okay, we'll go through these four pillars and talk about each one of them.
yeah, absolutely.
So the first thing to talk about, the first thing that makes a relationship work, in my view, is physicality. That would be the caption here, physicality. Now, by physicality, I don't just mean the sex. I mean the fact that you actually enjoy being around your partner. And this is the human sensorium. All parts of being around him or her make you feel good and comfortable at ease and perhaps generate oxytocin.
Yeah.
This is stuff like lying in front of the TV. This is stuff like being okay going for a walk. This is like knowing and recognizing and being, comforted by the smell and taste of someone. That's fine. That physicality is a kind of animal thing that we do. Now, it's not unusual for men to divorce that physicality from the sexual act. They will, indulge in the sexual act, but the rest of the time they don't want to be near their partner because that partner represents a space and a relationship that is too difficult for them.
Hmm.
So that's for me a really not necessarily the most important pillar, but it's an important pillar because if you have a relationship in which you are really not comfortable in one another's company physically, then this is something of a challenge. This is quite something to get over.
Hmm.
The second pillar in this, for me, is companionship. Now, there's a gorgeous phrase in this, which is, does he or she have your back? Do they have your back? So I remember a client telling me about going out with somebody and they were having this discussion about politics. And whilst they got on as a couple and they have different political views, when it came to this party, she took the side of the others and attacked him for his political views.
Which is a
And
public
this
undermining, isn't it, of
the
their.
public undermining and it's all a real illustration that companionship is, on fairly thin ice because she's not prepared to obviously have his back in this situation.
Mhm.
And you could argue, if you would go right back to the tribe, it's really important to have a companion who's going to look after you. I don't just mean physically. I mean, in terms of your arguments, in terms of how you put yourself forward, in terms of how you dress, and your confidence too. Because ideally, a companionship is about mutually developing one another's confidence. Companionship is a really, really vital thing to have, and it's not that common.
No. No.
The third pillar, this is kind of fascinating to me, is what I call the project.
Hmm.
What do we mean by the project? The project is, in its most basic terms, kids. You get married at 30, you have a couple of kids, the relationship goes very well because a lot of the energy and the effort and sometimes the strength of the relationship is in how you combine together to look after the children.
Hmm.
It really works out because that's a space where you can demonstrate your value to one another. And that's fantastic. However, what we've noticed over the past 30 or 40 years is an increase in divorces in the over 50s. And that's because one of the things that was holding the relationship together was the project. when the project is gone, there's suddenly an uncertainty about what they do.
When the
It's
nest is empty, they look at each other and go, "Who are you? And who am I?"
who are you now?
Yeah.
Because the thing that kept us together, the thing that kept the relationship going together, was looking after the children. And now, well, I'm not sure where we are now. And this isn't the end of the world. All right, I think it's much more sensitive and intelligent and respectful to say, well, the project is no longer the thing that's holding us together. Perhaps we can find a different way of being together. And you could have that in the relationship, or you may not. But it's important to be sensitive to this and recognize that, essentially you were together. There was really useful work done in child rearing. So you think carefully about this stage, about how it's going to work or not.
Mhm.
A fourth thing, this is really an old-fashioned thing to say, but the fourth pillar for me of a successful relationship is the network. Now, what I mean by this is that each one of us, without would rarely articulate this, will live in networks. So there's the network of your immediate family, the network of the larger family, the network of the community in which you live, and maybe even for some of us, the city.
Mhm.
Alongside that, there are the other communications we set up online. So the couple in a relationship exist in a network, and they very rarely think about the function of that network when they're together. So there's those TV programs. I bought a house abroad, escape to the country, home or away style thing. I forgot what they called that. Where they take a couple out of a town and they put them in Alicante or something in a nice little villa, and it looks gorgeous. That just looks just so cute. And then 3 days after the cameras left, they want to kill each other. They want to kill each other because, quite simply, their network has gone. So they spend all their time waiting for the kids to come so they could reinvigorate that sense, that important sense that they're being held and treasured and comforted by an existing network.
Mhm.
Now, when that's gone, or when a couple live on the edge of the network, they put that much more emphasis on those two. It becomes harder for those two to make it because they don't have the visible or even invisible support that a network represents. Now, that's an ideal. Those four pillars represent an ideal, but because a relationship is organic, things will go in and out of that. Sometimes it'll be easy to do that. Sometimes it'll be difficult to do that. But it's a relationship, so it ideally grows and is able to be flexible with those four pillars.
Mhm.
If only two or one of those pillars is operating, so those couples, and I've met a few who get married because they're having great sex, really with all the will in the world, this is really not going to last more than 4 or 5 years, tops. And if it's all dependent upon that, if you've got a relationship which is based on the network because all your friends are getting married, in a few years' time, you'll discover that was probably a bad move, etc.
Yeah.
So that is why I think a lot of relationships don't work. They require an effort and they require those pillars to be reinforced and cared for and supported. Can I just say a bit more about arrangements?
Yeah.
I mean, I I think it's fine if you want to be with someone and you want to set up something which is based on clear arrangements. I think the difficulty comes when you confuse one for the other, when you confuse an arrangement with a relationship. I had a client, who had a partner, and this guy's partner rang up and said, "Look, I've had a terrible accident on a Tuesday." And the guy said, "Okay, does that mean you won't be coming Thursday?" Okay. So, in other words, it's a horrible story. But what came first in this setup was it was based on an arrangement.
Yeah.
And because the other guy understood that it was based on an arrangement, right? They were able to, things were okay. So, no, I won't be able to make it Thursday. And the guy said, "Well, let's see what we can do." But they weren't intending to have a relationship. They were happy to have just an arrangement. And that's fine. If you're both on the same page, then you're going to be okay.
Mhm.
But if one partner thinks, "Oh, actually, what I really want is a relationship, which is a thing," and the other partner says, "Well, I really like to keep things as they are, but I'll just say yes," then we've got problems because she thinks something's going to happen, which is emotionally engaging and investment, and he doesn't even know about it. So he may not even know what he's doing wrong.
I find that a lot with clients as well. They don't understand the difference and they don't understand that they're doing anything wrong. Actually, what we're saying, neither are wrong, neither is preferable to the other,
Yeah,
just to understand them for what they are. It's interesting in popular media, we can't name any names and we can't name any programs by name, but there's a particular program that I watched. It's a dating style show. And it's interesting because the older characters on there, the older people who are taking part, say over 50, 60,
Yeah,
they're looking for, they may be widowed, they may be divorced, but it's like they've learned some of this stuff, even though they may not be able to articulate what they've learned. They've learned it, they embody
yeah,
it now. And they'll sit and they'll say, I really would like someone to go to the garden centre with and do this with, and let's see
yeah.
where it goes. So they understand it may be an arrangement that could potentially, but it's like they get that kind of knowledge by living through
They've
the
had
difficulties.
without saying it, they've acknowledged they've been through the four pillars,
Yeah.
and they've worked or they have not worked, and they get to that point of 50 or 60 when they go actually like pottering around the house, putting the bins out and cooking, doing a bit of cooking and watching telly in the garden centre. That will do. That's a relationship.
Yeah. Or there are other popular media characters who quite openly now are talking about the fact that they're in multiple arrangements with people and everybody
Yeah,
knows about it and that's fine. So whether it's going to become a thing, I don't know, like a trend,
yeah.
no idea.
I mean, that's a question beyond our scope, and it's a
Yeah.
fantastic question. But it is interesting. For what it's worth, I'm a little bit cynical and not certain whether that kind of new openness is going to be able to work because that it suggests an equalizing amongst all partners. We all agree that this is the arrangement. We're all going to have this level of emotional commitment. The diary part isn't difficult. The measuring of the containment of other emotions might make this tricky. But
Mhm.
you're right. New setups are facilitating arrangements, which is a way of exploring what we're like as people.
Mhm.
But I feel um, I feel pessimistic that that will work because it's difficult to measure your emotional engagement.
Mhm.
Someone may want more from this than they're willing to give.
When you have clients who might be coming to you for say marital difficulties and they've got to the point where they understand that what they've been trying to do is extend an arrangement and not upset the other party, so they've gone through marriage and maybe they actually really want now to be in a relationship where they can be more compassionate and freeing and allowing that person to do what they need to do and do what they need to do.
Yeah.
How do they cross that threshold in therapy or with your help? I know it will be in therapy or with the help.
Well, the model that we're using here breaks it down into the four components. So we look, first of all, the relationship that the client has to the body. Then we talk about the relationship that they've grown up with in terms of how they relate to others. We look at how they think and get them a distance on their thinking. And of course, finally, we look at their emotional life and what they've been brought up with. And one of the things I can talk to with some authority is that a man's relationship to his body is to a large degree based on what he saw from his father and the need to perform. And if he has performed well and successfully as a man in a certain way, he won't feel much of a need to explore his emotional connections. If he be brought up with a family or a father rather who's should we say sullen or uncooperative or didn't speak much, then that's his model of masculinity. And he'll keep it like that. So his ability to change, it just needs a lot of work. He will need to find that, and I mean this word, courage to come to therapy, the courage to talk about, right, I'm a little disappointed in how I am right now, but I don't know why I'm like this. That's when we explore what we call the horizontal form, which is the relationship to thinking and the relationship to emotions.
Mhm.
That's what we look at to find out if he can do that. But, a phrase I used before, and it's a big one in therapy, is it's not his fault.
No.
Didn't very people choose to be that obtuse and aggressive and simple-minded. They learned it as a safety mechanism. And the
Yeah.
better they are at it, the more they will achieve a degree of success and recognition amongst their peers. But doing well amongst your peers is one thing. Developing the ability to be in a relationship and to leave the arrangement is another. Men stay in arrangements with their friends because they can be relied upon to produce this expected self. Let's see Harry down the pub every Friday night. He has 5 pints of Stella, 2 bags of pork scratchings, and a curry. That's what he does every Friday. We know that. We expect that from him. But when Harry goes home, then he's going to be asked to be someone slightly different. He's going to be asked to produce a degree of flexibility and openness because eventually his partner may tire of his need to act in a certain way because it will look like a refusal of the emotional environment of the home. It's that unspoken, unstated refusal to shift criteria that makes it so difficult.
Mhm.
If your criteria are arrangement, that's fine for work, for friendship, perhaps. But if your criteria do not change when it comes to a relationship, then we've got a problem because that refusal to change looks like a refusal of her or him.
Mhm. I suppose, which is why so many, I get it myself, so many men that come to therapy with relationship problems, whether in an arrangement, they call it a relationship problem, have
Yeah,
been sent by the other half to sort themselves
yeah,
out. And that's what we
yeah.
bring to
That's
us.
what we see. Yeah,
I've been told to come here to sort myself out because when I
yeah,
sort myself out, I can go back home or
yeah.
we can continue.
I got to tell
Mm.
in therapy, this is great for us because when the guy rocks up and he sits there and he's sullen, you say, "Well, you all right?" He said, "Yeah, well, my wife has sent me here." Oh, great. So, do you want to be here or not? Because if you don't want to be here, I'll be frank with you. I'm just, I'm not really going to engage. You have to want to come. You have to agree on the agenda. You have to agree on this is the program, and then the changes will happen. But the changes are for you. If he goes, I always remember people coming to me with cocaine problems, which is a big thing in Manchester.
Yeah,
And I say, well, who are you stopping taking cocaine for? I said, oh, it's for my daughter. So well, it's not going to work then, is it?
can't do
Right?
it for somebody
You
else.
can't do that. You've got to do it for you. And if you do it for you, then we got a chance. We got a real chance of making it work. If you do it for someone else, you do it for the wife, we have problems coming because
Because then the resentment will build and
yeah,
possibly relapses
and
and
then he will go back into what is safe, and what is safe is an arrangement.
yeah.
Arrangements are, relatively straightforward, and they're where he feels safe.
Mhm. We want to talk about popular media, and
Okay.
um, we've recently watched a film, Shotgun Wedding,
Oh, Shotgun Wedding, J Lo and
with
Josh, someone.
sort of explores some of the issues we're talking about
Oh
today.
yeah, this is a great way of recapping some of the points we made. So if I may, just go through those captioned pillars.
Mhm.
First physicality, second companionship, third the project, and fourth the network. So the film goes through these.
Yeah.
The film goes through physicality in the sense that they are in times tied together at certain points of the film in which they have to engage with whether there's physicality to free themselves to get to a bit different place. In terms of companionship, they've got to learn to be with themselves in a sudden crisis situation. They have to find if they can manage that. And I think the film is a bit more complex than that because I think she's very definitely in charge of that. But that tells you something about how the companionship works out. The third point is the project. The project is getting free and freeing all their relatives and, getting the island to be in a state in which it's going to be a comfortable destination for other people. And finally, the network. The network is there, immediately apparent, because they're having a wedding.
Mhm.
And just to push at some really famous psychological tropes, the network end up in the pool. The pool of water is the unconscious. So, so the pool represents the unconscious, and then figures pop out of the unconscious to bring up questions which threaten whether or not this relationship is going to work. I'm just fascinated by that because it seems such an obvious representation of the unconscious and their past. But their past pops up to ask them questions and to test the relationship, and it works in the end, and they get there because films have to resolve in that fashion. But it
Mhm.
seems a cute way of illustrating some of the things that we're talking about.
But what did I mean? I was struck by I was struck by the part where before they're bound together, we're not giving too much away. Before they're bound together, it's the night before the wedding, and the main character is trying to get the husband to be to actually sleep with her. And
Yeah,
he's so distracted. Well, first of all, by stuff he needs to do, then by the mother-in-law, her,
yeah.
her potential mother-in-law. So distracted. So it's they haven't been communicating at all until the point where they're forced into crisis.
And they're forced into crisis, and then their physicality is something that has to operate.
Yeah,
So, you could quite easily spend some time on the whole masculinity issue here because this guy is struggling to perform under pressure, right? The shadow of the past is upon him, and she might represent the challenge too far. I think subtly the film represents J-Lo as quite a strong character.
yeah.
And I think it may be a bit much for him to rise to the occasion on this.
But he's also consumed with jealousy, isn't he? There's an ex-boyfriend. He's consumed with jealousy. That's getting in the way of their progress.
Yeah, so he's in the shadow of this guy who's over the top, much more attractive, over the top, has a certain kind of sensual power about him, which is difficult for a man because he's suddenly in a competition there, and it's difficult for him. So as I say, I love the fact that it's so neatly arranged. All these characters in the pool, they all represent the past and the unconscious. It's cute. It's really helpful to think through how these models operate.
Okay. So might it be a time to talk about some work that's going to come out soon? We've got your 2021 book, Men Should
We
Talk.
have Men Should Talk, and of course, we're working on the manual. And the manual is going to be half the size of that, but the manual is a very, very focused piece of work that will offer lots and lots of tools and techniques and tips for getting through the business of being a man.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Of course, we're doing these podcasts and we're putting out some Instagram. So we're doing a lot of promotional work at the moment, which we'll update you with in every podcast.
Generally, what we see Men Should Talk model are men, but it's not gender specific.
It is definitely not. I keep saying that it's not a gender specific model. Plus, we have female clients. So, I'm very, very happy because it's not gender specific to talk to anyone about what's going on with it.
So just talk us through, if someone comes to you and it's either the wife or the husband or the significant other has sent them to sort themselves out and the issues seem to be around a relationship or an arrangement, but they're not sure what it is. They've got this thing going on. What are they going to get when they come to see us?
Well, they're going to get a warm
consultation to the other end of things.
Yeah, well, just for that free. So for the first 45, 50 minutes, they're just coming in and we're just talking through what happened to them. So we'll get a good picture of their history. And what we'll do is potted histories within that 45, 50 minutes of body, relationship to others, thoughts and emotions. And what we'll do is feed back to them, this is what we think is going on. This, for example, might be why it's difficult for you to get into a relationship because your father was not very good at that, didn't speak much. And the relationship between your parents, for example, never seemed warm or intimate, always seemed cold. And, they seemed like separate people. As a result, you may have imprinted an idea that a relationship is not a good place to be, or a scary or a difficult place to be, because these are separate models, separate figures in our setup. And then what you would do is, as you say, every week we go through what's your relationship to your body, what's your relationship to others, how is that going, how have you developed that, what do others represent to you, and we look at your thinking. And this is a big deal to talk about how we get a distance on your thinking instead of thinking that you are your thinking. Got a lot of work to do there. And then finally, and if it's about a relationship, it's about understanding what's going on with you emotionally. And the way I've spoken about it before is that men think of the emotions as terrifying territory they walk around the edges of, and they glance backwards at it now and then so they hear sounds and cries, but they're not going. So they know it exists. They'll walk around the perimeter, but they're not going. And because they don't go, it's the fourth thing that we do. So they are ready to start exploring that because it's a linchpin thing. Mm-hmm. If they develop a warm, considered relationship to their emotions, they've got a chance of going forward. I saw a client recently and I said, do you want to talk about your emotions? And he said, no. So, well, it's going to be a tough one then, isn't it? This is the really important part of who you are. So this is why it's week 5. So one of the things we do, as you know, in the first session that consult is we ask them, let's have 3 words to describe your relationship to your emotions. And they will come up with all sorts of things. I said, no, use relationship words. So what's your relationship to your partner like? And they could use words for that. So what's your relationship to your emotions? So one of the most common words with men is volatile, unpredictable, scary. Okay, I guess they're relationship words. Would you like a relationship with anyone with those words were paramount? No. Okay. So by the time we get to week 5, we don't ask this question every week, we're not boring. But by the time we get to week 5, we say, what's your relationship to your emotions now? And it's a lovely way of testing gently how far we've come. Because if they are more accepting and maybe a little nervous or apprehensive, that's a big jump from scary to apprehensive. Mm-hmm. And, we do what we can in the 4 or 5 sessions. After that, they might want to come back for more. But essentially what we do in Men Should Talk is give them tools and techniques to have a bit of a think and reflect on how they are.
that's why I was so privileged to have been trained by you in the boat method that is coming forward at the moment and using it with people. What has struck me is that because it suits somebody who's used to doing things, we do give them a book and they do have exercises to
Oh
do
yeah, thank you for reminding me. Mm.
each week. And bringing them back or not, I've got a particular client at the moment that's not brought the book back, and we started with what's underneath that then?
Yeah,
Is it a simple forgetting, or was it it's not important,
this is a really good point.
or
It's just really good, right? So first of all, we give it a book. I don't know anyone else who does that, by the way. So we give them a book, a plain A5 book for them to write stuff in. But all they're going to do is bring it back. But half the time they go, "Oh, I left my book in the car." I think first of all, there is the forgetting if they're dashing. We're on
yeah,
Deepscape.
we
It's
all
really
capable of
easy to
that.
forget that. But the second thing is that what the book often represents, because they're at work every week, is a very revealing, potentially emotional space that they're a little anxious about.
Mhm.
So they're scared to leave it around. They're scared to leave it in the cab. They're not sure what to do with it. So my way around that is to say, okay, I'd like to see the book next time, but I've got a lot of paper here. So have some paper and a pen, because I've got a bunch of those too. And you write this stuff up, write this exercise down and put it in the book. And to repeat the fact that to make any kind of progress, we have to do work. In all areas of life, progress, I'm afraid, requires effort. So make the effort, we're going to be okay.
Mhm.
If they don't make the effort, well, for God's sake, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, we're not suggesting there's lots of work to do in it, and you do not get graded. It doesn't have to be handed in.
Yeah,
It's the commitment to yourself and the work that you're
yeah.
doing that you make the effort.
Well, I think of
It's
it,
not a lot
it's
of
an
work.
exploration. It's an exploration.
If all they've got in terms of space to talk to somebody who's not going to judge,
Yeah,
space away from their network, as you say, so they can
yeah,
be more honest and raw than they've ever been before. If that's the only space they've got, it's still not a lot in a
yeah,
week. So this is just an additional extra bit. When you've got that 5 minutes to yourself, when you've got that time to think, if you've been thinking about it in the car, then write something down quite quickly when you get home. Just capture, and it becomes a record of their progress and their commitment to the process and themselves.
absolutely. So one of the first things I ask in every session, you ask in every session, is how did you feel at the end of the last session? Let's say I was thinking, no, we're not interested in what you thought. We're interested in how you felt, because we keep pushing at their ability to be in the room. So it said, I've been seeing someone for a while, and he said, I'm afraid you're the only person I talk to about what's going on with me in a month. So
I
these are
use the word
very,
afraid. I'm afraid. It's like the
yeah,
need.
he's afraid, or he feels he can't say these things at home. So he kind of has an explosive hour with me and then lets everything go. And this is not ideal, because the point about that 4 or 5 weeks is to equip you with tools which you build into your life. It's nothing as demanding as a daily journal, but it is building into an understanding of, oh, I know why I'm like this. I know why I respond like this. I know why this is challenging. And the understanding is often enough to lead to a change of behavior.
Yeah, yeah. That's what
But
I'm.
it is odd to talk to people. So I don't talk to anyone about this. I just thought I'd share it all with you for an hour. And screaming, shouting, and crying for an hour, and I'm off now. Okay.
Not every client does that, do they?
No, but some do, and you think, okay. But and it's not ideal. But this is a big point I need to make, I think, is that a lot of the men I've talked to, and this is literally hundreds and hundreds of men I've talked to, when they get close to their emotions, they can report on them. And reporting is translating their import into language, translating their force into language. But what they sometimes do in the room, and what they sometimes do with others, thank God, is they get in touch with their emotions. And when you're really in touch with the emotions, it's more of an embodied, shaking, big thing. But if they haven't done much of that, the best they hope for is reporting. And we push it a little bit beyond reporting in the room. So you can actually say, what does it feel like to talk about that? What does it feel like when he did that or when she did that?
Mm.
When we do that, then we're getting a sense of, okay, I get it. This is working.
Thank you. I think that
Thank you.
any other points concludes this podcast.
Thank
So
you
if
very much.
they want to come for a consultation, how do they get in touch with us?
They call our numbers, which are on the website. So it's Gareth at menshouldtalk.com, Michelle at
Michelle at
Gareth at menshouldtalk, and
mentiontalk.com.
Michelle at menshouldtalk.com.
Have a
Men,
look at the website, which
look at
is
the website, look at the, listen to the podcasts. There's some little films there. It's growing all the time. There's more stuff on it all the time.
absolutely, and hoping to see some of these lovely audience in clinic soon.
I hope so. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Do consultations on Zoom as well as face to face.
Yeah, we do. We do. We're on Deetsgate, but we also do face to face
And
on
there's
Zoom.
also an opportunity to come to a therapy studio in Mid Cheshire.
Oh yeah, Mid Cheshire too.